protecting legal right to information is a very important topic, but let's admit it's not a very catchy title. My colleagues from campaigns and communications in London struggle with it all the time, especially when they try to make topics like this and talks like this trending on social media. And they also very much hate when they hear that lawyers are involved, because they think that when lawyers they get their hands on any topic, however exciting, however important, we always make it sound very dull and technical. And speaking as a lawyer, I can confirm that when we talk about right to information, we love to talk about international standards on right to information. We love to talk about laws, about court decisions. We also love to invoke the importance of right to information to sustainable development goals, or how important is it for participatory democracy and for state accountability and transparency. So basically, catchy phrases like that. But what do we really mean when we invoke the legal right to information today? What do we mean when we say that information gives power to people to take control over their lives and to hold governments to account? Who owns the right to information? Who should defend it? And should it really be left onto the lawyers and journalists to defend it? So when looking at the answers for these topics, I'm often reminded of a story which Aruna Roy, a famous Indian activist and campaigner for right to information, narrates when she talks about the history of right to information movement in India. And this story involves a very prominent journalist and an activist, a poor woman from a community in Rajasthan who had a very little formal education. And at a press conference demanding the right to information law, this journalist asked the campaigner, this poor woman, with extreme skepticism, asked her how did she think she was qualified to campaign for right to information when many more learned and educated people failed in this quest. And the woman told him, look, if I give 10 rupees to my son and I send him to do shopping for me at the market, when he comes back, I ask him for a receipt. I ask him for an account. Now government spend tons and millions of rupees in my name, so I have every right to ask for an account. Our money, our accounts. And with this brilliant answer, she basically defined the goal of right to information movement in India for years to come. Our money, our accounts. And this became a slogan for right to information movement in the country. I'm also reminded of work of my colleagues at Article 19 in Mexico, who work with indigenous communities in Nuevo Egipto and Lázaro Cárdenas in Chiapas, which is one of the Mexican states. And this community was excluded from proper health care for many years because the local government employed incompetent doctors and underqualified doctors who didn't provide a proper care, didn't show up for the shifts, and also didn't keep a proper stock of medical supplies. And with the help of Article 19, over 300 women from those communities filed the right to information requests to local authority, asking what were the contracted shifts for those doctors, what care were they supposed to provide, how much money did the local government spend on healthcare in their community. And then with this information, they demanded the change for medical supplies, and they demanded the proper health care for which the local government contracted the medical facility anyhow was done. So for those of you who might think that what we are talking here today about, it's very urban or middle-class affair, the story of these women from India and from Chiapas in Mexico shows that women living in poor communities understand how corruption works because they experience it every day in their life. And they also understand the gendered consequences of corruption and how corruption keeps them in unprivileged position in the society. I'm also reminded of work of my colleagues and partners in Russia, where we supported development and running of a special dedicated online portal, Rost-Ответ, which allows individuals to submit the details about information they need in their lives. And these details are then turned with the help of lawyers, so sometimes lawyers are quite useful, into formal right to information requests, which are filed under the Russian right to information law. And this portal now receives about 60 information requests a month. And what originally started as some sort of individual's quest for information about some particular plight in their lives, it's now a very useful tool for journalists and bloggers living in Russia to get inroad to a story about a particular problem in society. It helped them to uncover corruption in 41 regions, social care homes in Russia, and which was not providing adequate social care, or helped them to expose illegal oil refinery working in close to residential area. And this also gave people hope what can be achieved through invoking the law of the land, and also showed that the right information can really outroot the corrupt people through different levels of the government, lock, stock, and barrel. So now we understand that in Malaysia, you are at a very important crossroad, very important part in your history when you are starting processes for transition to democracy. And we believe that experience of Article 19 and many partners around the world can help you to make a case for supporting and developing basis for proper right to information in the country, and that this really can underpin all the reform processes. But in order to make this success, I want to give you some tips based on our experience, sort of things to do and things to avoid when campaigning for this issue in the country. So 3 do's and 3 don'ts. So first is make sure that campaign for right to information connects to all issues. It needs to really start at looking at beneficiaries and end users of this information. What is the information they need? In what form? What for? And also it can help to make sure that this underlying issue for what they need information is brought to the spotlight. And through it also, the right to information can be understood. The second thing is that don't leave the right to information work to lawyers and journalists. Make sure that it involves all the people. And again, it stems from the first point is that when the right to information is presented, not as something theoretical, not as a law, but something really useful which people can see benefiting them, they can really get involved. And they can stop being resigned to state of affairs, succumb to the resignation. And they are not afraid to ask questions and say no about small things which they involve them and their life. And then also big questions later on, such as national security, state budgets, wars and poverty, and so on. And this also involves doing more than just conferences and meetings at the international fora or the events like this. It also involves the grassroots exchanges and people involvements at the lowest level. The third thing, and this was already, I can follow on what the previous speaker said and our Malaysian colleague, is that right to information is not just about the right to information issues. It needs to look at all the other legislation which prevents access to it, state secret laws, defamation, media laws, privacy. And campaign for right to information must include also calls to repel those which prevent and which do not comply with international standards, and making calls for the amendment or for adoption of proper laws that protect freedom of expression. And now, 3 things that you should avoid or not do. And here, the first is that you should not be put off by unpredictable political and legal processes. Because here you are for a really long run. Even in the countries which we heard, like Sri Lanka, which adopted law, it happened after 13 years of fight. So it's going to take a long time. And many of us have been there. We have experienced that. We have campaigned for right to information law for many years, and then it got stuck in some parliament committee or the government, and years and months which went on to these efforts were totally wasted. Well, actually, the efforts are not always wasted, never wasted, but it feels like that. It feels totally fruitless and frustrating. So what we have done in the situations like this, against such setbacks, is that we used other possible venues for accessing information, such as relying on, health laws or environmental legislation, such as the examples we heard here already, and try to see whether we can get information through these other venues and processes. And also we worked on laying the foundation for the right to information legislation in the country, looking at the issues such as improving the filing system or archives, working with the archivists and improving the system, which would then enable access to information when the law is adopted. The second thing to avoid is do not get, I know that right to information law, national information law is very important and it's start of everything and needs to be the focus, but it's not just about the legislation. It's always about the culture. So the culture needs to change. The best right to information law will not change the culture. The public officials and civil servants are always the biggest enemies against the right to information law because they think that they will be held accountable when it is adopted and that will be somehow responsible. And this is a total nonsense because actually when the law is adopted, it enables them to follow the law of the land. It gives them the foundation under which they can respond, but they don't see it like this. And it's also important to campaign for the information which is not just given, but also information which is meaningful. Because stocks and whole list of raw data will not help anyone to achieve anything. You need information which can be read, which can be reviewed, which can be used by the individuals and those who need it. So it needs to be meaningful. And then the third thing is to avoid is now we are talking a lot about the state information held by the state, but it's very important to keep a focus and avoid just focus on the state, but also look at information held by private companies. And this is especially very important in a situation when a lot of private companies have gained a control over vast trove of data or services and are delivering those public services instead of the government. So we need to also look at the information held by private bodies, by private companies that deliver public function. I very much hope that this experience of Article 19 and all of the other ones who are here, internationals, will help the civil society, activists, lawyers, journalists, and public at large in Malaysia to make the right to information reality here and make it really the genuine forum for dialogue and reforms in the society. And for the governmental officials who are here, I want to leave you with a challenge. In Czech Republic, where I'm from, we have this saying that governmental officials and public servants always talk about the corruption in state administration in the past tense. So just think in 2 years or a couple of years' time what they will be talking about you. And this is much more than aiming for transparency. It is and just exposing the nuts and bolts of what government is doing and making it more visible. We should be really aiming for a new form of government where the citizens and people living in the country can really influence the governmental policies and can shape how and what government is delivering in their name. Thank you.